Hello and welcome to the Women in Technology Symposium, and I'm so glad to see so many familiar and strange, unknown faces in the audience. It was about a year ago that Stephanie and I applied for the diversity grant, and we knew we wanted to do something that involved technology, that involved also information literacy as an aspect, and women. The reason being that despite there being a generation of digital natives in terms of their end use of technology, evidence really still points to the fact that a lot of young women express apprehension about learning the skills that would allow them to fully participate in the digital space. And that was the idea behind this talk. We wanted to provide examples on stage of women who have harnessed technology, especially in the design fields, and that resulted in the wonderful panelists we have here today. I want to keep this a little bit brief, but almost as if by magic, a couple of days ago, an article appeared written by Rebecca Minkoff, and it was an op-ed in Business of Fashion. Fashion tech revolution needs more women. And I was like, perfect. And she talked about a lot of the same things that we talked about in our proposal. For instance, that 25% of science, technology, and engineering professionals are women, only 25%, despite the fact that women make up half the workforce. And despite the fact that 80% of jobs in the next decade will require technology skills. And then she goes on to say something that I've often thought, that this isn't a race to adapt to the new technologies that are coming our way. It really should be looked at as we need to take charge. We need to adapt the technologies to meet our desires, our needs, our dreams. And in order to do that, we need to be more than just familiar with using the devices. We need to get into code. We need to learn how it works. And so, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Grace Choi of Mink.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Helen, for the warm welcome and the invitation to speak to such a wonderful group. I've always wanted to speak at FIT. I took a few classes here in between college and grad school, and I always thought this was such a wonderful place to not only learn, but just to be around. And so I'm really excited to be here and to speak to you all here. And thank you so much for coming out. I'm always excited to see people who really love to learn about new things, because that's what I really love to do as well. So love to be around people who love learning. So let's get to it. So for those of you who aren't familiar, my name is Grace, and I'm the creator of Mink, which started out as a printer that prints makeup and was a concept that introduced the world to a possibility of the personal digital fabrication of makeup. How it worked was quite simple. The printer worked just like any standard printer, but instead of dyeing paper, it dyed powder. And after the printing was complete, the powder could then be immediately applied as a powder cosmetic. Or if you wanted to convert it into a different kind of cosmetic, like a lipstick or a lip gloss, you just needed to apply a mixing medium and convert it and apply it as you created it. Since the initial launch, the embodiment of the concept has evolved quite a bit, but I make sure that the spirit of the concept remains intact, which is to allow you to take any image or pixel and transform it into a wearable color cosmetic. If you'd like to see the printer or any of the other iterations I mentioned in action, there are several videos online, and we have some links on our website at hellomink.com. That is the only shameless plug I'm going to put into my presentation. And also for those of you who are even more curious, I have online also an open source version of and directions on how you can make your own makeup printer from any ordinary inkjet printer. So that's also somewhere floating in the internet space and YouTube. That's enough about what I'm going to talk about the now, because I think what might be most helpful in this conversation would be to talk about the path that led me to the now, and how STEM is involved in my work. Okay. So I'm going to start with a quick tour of my educational background, mostly because I couldn't fit it into my next slide, but also because it'll show that although you absolutely do not have to pursue what you study in school as a profession, what you learn will absolutely benefit you in your chosen career, even though it may seem completely unrelated. I actually grew up in, I should not move away from the mic. I grew up in New York, so I'm a New York native. I don't know if anybody of you here are, but I went to Bronx High School of Science, and unlike its name, I learned nothing about science at Bronx Science. It was just like any ordinary high school, but I guess, it seems to have a reputation for being very sciencey. But after Bronx Science, I went to Cornell, and I actually chose hotel management as my major. So I went to the Cornell Hotel School, which was actually a very different college experience than a traditional college experience, which I think many of you probably have here at FIT. So the hotel school was I would say more hands-on, more vocational. I think the biggest memory that I have from the hotel school is that we had a lot of practicals, and also a lot of the things that I used from that experience were the culinary experiences. We had to do a lot of cooking, and what I learned from that was that cooking is actually chemistry. So I think that really made me appreciate products and what lies beneath them. And I think that's how I got interested in how things are made. From there, I took maybe a hiatus in education for about 7 years, and I did a series about 5 or 6 projects, which I'll go into detail on my next slide. And I went to learn a little bit about business at Harvard Business School. I had a dandy time there. And then I decided to do what I'm doing now, which is making innovative products in cosmetics. And you'll see a bunch of kind of other things that I put up there, including FIT and Hunter and YouTube and the JCC. I wanted to put that there because a lot of my learning, I continue to learn, and I think those institutions, as well as the internet and YouTube, those are the places that I continue to learn from, and I think those are just as important as going to an institution to learn or getting a degree. I think I learned most of the things I use in my work through YouTube, as well as the internet and Google. And there's just so many free resources now that you could really learn how to do so many different things online. You just have to look for them. And have the desire to really learn about it. So I consider all of that a part of my formal education as well. Now on to my professional experience, and what I mean about projects and what led me to do what I do. And if you look at it, I have no cosmetics background at all. I started out my innovation career in medicine. And I was a product developer at Weill Cornell Medical School, doing radiology products at the Cornell Cardiovascular MRI Lab, which is a mouthful in and of itself. And I was there for a good 2-3 years, and I learned a lot about fabrics and skin products and adhering fabrics to skin and things like that. And it was a really great experience. And I learned a lot about regulation there. I learned a lot about skin there. You learn a lot about, having a lot of patience there. But, after a few years, especially when you're a creative person, you want to kind of, break out of your comfort zone, and you want to move on to different kind of mediums. And so that's what I did. So after about 2-3 years, I decided to go into jewelry. And I think that transition, a lot of people get a little confused about, I guess, and I would too, how you make that leap. And it was a very interesting leap. There was an open call from HSN on, they were looking for like inventions, and I said, okay, I think I can do that. And so I thought up this convertible jewelry invention where, you know, it was a necklace that can transform into a lot of different kinds of jewelry pieces, including a bracelet or earrings, and different kinds of configurations. And it actually ended up winning, and I actually got to license it to the Home Shopping Network. And that's a picture of me there actually selling it, and it was exciting. I got to meet Kelly Ripa, so that was kind of cool. She's very pretty. And from there, I was really excited. But actually, once you do something like a licensing deal, it was a great learning experience on the business front, because you do lose a lot of creative control. And so after that, I wanted to actually own a project. I wanted to own my own kind of like brand. And I realized I'm actually not a good jewelry designer. And so I said, okay, what other kind of projects do I want to do? And also the mechanisms and the kind of things that I was doing for jewelry, you know, it didn't quite stimulate me as much. And so I decided to go on to shoes. And so I designed a shoe where you don't see the heel component there, but it was a shoe where the heel snaps on and the shoe converts into a flat. So it was before, actually there are several people that have tried this. It's like the unicorn of the high heel shoe. It was the bane of my this project. So I had a great time with this, and it took me about a year or two to get this prototype working. And then I moved on. Oh, and then in between that and the next one, I went to business school after that one. And then after I graduated business school, I didn't think I would join a company, but I got a really good offer from Burger King's innovation group to make hamburgers and French fries. And that's me with a large paper mache French fry. And we were actually making Status Fries, which was the newest fat-free French fry, which kind of flopped. But it was really interesting on a chemistry level on how they work. And that's actually the black hamburger, which is actually from Japan, but they just launched it here. There was like a little blip here. It didn't do too well, but that's actually made from food coloring. And the reason they turned green here was because they use dyes, but in Japan, they don't turn green because they use squid ink. So that's how that works. But it was interesting to me. I actually took the job because I had never done food before. And so I was like, I could learn something from this. And I love learning. And I said, okay. And the money was great. I was like, I don't like being poor. So I was like, let me not be poor for once. And so I decided, okay, I'll take this job. So I did it. And then I was there for a very short period of time because I realized, you know, I really love being on my own. I really love being a creative, you know, and it's a hard life, but I really love being, I guess, an entrepreneur-ish creative person. And so I left that job, and then I started doing Mink, which is the current thing that I'm doing now, which is being to personally kind of alter and fabricate your own cosmetics. And you see that right here. You see several different kind of iterations I've been through. There's that printer version, and then I moved on to kind of like more of a pen pipette looking version. And then the question mark is I'm actually releasing a newer version very shortly. And also since then I've coded a new app for the pen that goes with it. So that's in a very small snapshot, my professional kind of resume, if you see, of projects that I've done. And most people just see the result. You know, I think if you go to a store shelf or you go to, you know, Walgreens, you just see the result. And I think as a product developer, or, you know, or these ladies on stage also, what they actually see is, you know, they see this. They see biophysics. They see magnetism, right? They see the fundamentals of what builds these products, what these actually are. It's kind of like the Matrix, right? You see people, but you see all these, like, you see code. So a lot of A lot of the food stuff that I was doing, it was all chemistry. I don't see a French fry. I see all the chemistry that was behind that vegetable fat not penetrating that potato, you know. For this, it was chemistry, and this is mechanical engineering, and this is also computer science. And I call this like a beast of a project because it's just all of it all at once. And I think this is why this is the longest project I've ever done, because it is very, very complex, but also very rewarding at the same time. But that's not to say that, you know, if you want to do something new and innovative, that you should only focus on the STEM part. You know, I think, you know, it is important if you're in a business, if you're in a profession of creating new things, that you have to change something more than just ornamental. The change has to be fundamental and novel. But if you're also in the business of selling fashionable or designy goods, you also have to produce a good that is designed well. Because if you don't, then you just made a really cool thing that no one's gonna buy. So you kind of have to do both. So if you want to be in this business of kind of assimilating both, doing STEM and design, you have to create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And what I mean by that is the peanut butter and jelly sandwich has been around for over 100 years. That is insane. There are very rare combinatory things that have been around for over 100 years. The first recipe was published in 1901. And this combination, and if you think about it, it's two sauces of different viscosities, of different tastes, that combine so well that it's stuck in the American dictionary of recipes for that period of a long time. So if you want to do, my point is, and having rattled off about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is, if you want to do this kind of work or this kind of art so well, you have to be well versed in both. And here are some examples of the current things or the new cutting edge things that are coming out these days, where, you know, I think to each their own, right? You could say some are doing it right on, nailing it right on the head. Some are doing it well, some are not doing it well, some are doing it so-so. But I think, you know, depending upon what the purpose was, I think when you're well versed in both of the different verticals, you can fine tune it to get whatever reaction you're trying to get out of the user. So some of the things, they're trying to get the user to buy their product. Some of the things, they're just trying to get a kind of reaction in terms of, you know, oh my God, that's kind of crazy. I think like the Balenciaga, the Dolce & Gabbana headphones, you know, they're like $5,000. It's fantastic, but that is not a mass product. I think that was more of kind of like a, you know, luxury product. So, you know, I think, but that's done fantastically, by the way. So I think that is very, very nice. But I think to sum up and stop rambling, my point is, learn the rules like a pro, including you know, design as well as STEM, because STEM is a big part of design now because it's so around us, so that you can break them like an artist. Just like the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So you could turn it into peanut butter and jelly French toast. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Krystal Persaud from littleBits. Welcome.
So hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. My name is Krystal. I'm the Director of Product Design at littleBits. And actually, from a show of hands, how many people have heard of littleBits before? Okay, cool, so a good group. So for those of you who don't know, littleBits is a platform of electronic building blocks that are very easy to use, and they enable you to create your own inventions, however large or small they might be. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about my creative journey and how I got to littleBits, and then I'm going to spend some time explaining what littleBits is and how it's breaking down barriers in design and technology. So, a lot of what I would love to share with you guys today is finding your inner designer voice and your opinion as a designer and a creative person. So, very early on, I figured out that I'm a very stubborn person, and that I figured out that I only wanted to design products that fell in the intersection of design, technology, and education. And I'll talk a little bit about how I got to that point and how I realized that's my calling and that's my opinion as a designer. Right there. So my career actually started with, like many things, with a Google search. I grew up, I was one of 4 girls growing up in my family, and I had 3 older sisters that were all very into science and healthcare. And growing up, I was really artistic, and I loved art, and I loved making things, but I was also very into science and physics and chemistry. So at the time, you know, I was a little confused in high school, not quite sure if I was going to be a professional artist or a doctor, like my parents wanted me to be. And I just started Googling, you know, what are good intersections of art and science? And I actually came across design, and I came across industrial design, and realized that that really struck a chord with me, that I could make things that would improve people's lives. And so I ended up going to Georgia Tech's School of Industrial Design over in Atlanta. And that's really where I found my first circle, design, and I fell in love with design. I loved being in studio and getting my hands dirty and making the ideas I had in my head physical. It was very empowering and addictive to me. I completely loved it until there's a specific project in my head that I'm not sure if you guys have to make too, but it's sort of a classic industrial design project of designing your own lamp. And I got to this project, and I hated it so much. I couldn't believe it. Like, I had such a visceral reaction, and my reaction was like, what? Like, why would I design a lamp? That's so boring. Like, we don't need more lamps. Like, that's ridiculous. And it was like I remember it like it was yesterday, because it was a big moment for me that I realized that I really cared about what I designed. I didn't want to design just anything that somebody asked me to. And you know, it really made me think, like, does the world need another lamp? Like, and my opinion was no, it doesn't. So I really want to encourage you guys to have strong opinions. I was like, no, you know what? The world doesn't need another lamp. But it was also my homework assignment, so I had to figure out a way to do it. So I did my own spin on the project, and I designed a lighting device that was powered by the microbes in soil. So to me, it wasn't your typical lighting device, and it was something that could actually improve someone's life and educate them about how energy works. And that's actually where I realized, wait, I'll go back one side. You can see me in the corner. I had really long hair, and I was like trying to figure out what a multimeter was. I didn't study electronics at all, and I just figured out how to put together this really simple circuit, and that's where I realized that I loved technology, and I think really interesting things happen when design and technology overlap, and that I wanted to keep doing things like that. So when I was ready to graduate from Georgia Tech, I think for most product designers, a dream job might look like anything on the screen, working for a consultancy like IDEO, designing cars, designing furniture, designing consumer electronics. You know, housewares is huge. And I had the same reaction. Oh my God, I do not want to do that. Again, I'm very stubborn. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to apply for any of these jobs. Like, again, does the world need, like, I was just joking with Maddie, does the world need another chair? Like, absolutely not. It doesn't. That's my opinion. It doesn't. You know what? There are so many things that I think the world needs, like a chair and a car, totally not what the world needs. So I kind of realized as soon as I graduated with a degree in industrial design that industrial design is dead. Like, that's what I was thinking when I graduated. I was like, industrial design is gone. Like, this, like, what is the future of products? Like, what is the future of product design? And I love making this analogy, and I'll talk about it more when I talk about littleBits, but it just feels like these companies are parachuting down these product solutions for people, and we just passively consume them, and we just take them. Like, we buy the cars that are available, or we buy the chairs that are available, but I feel like that's such a dated way to view how we interact with products, and I wanted it to be more educational and more interactive. So I decided after I graduated, my parents loved this, I don't want to work anywhere. I couldn't find, I would like, go on Course 77 and the job boards, and I would look at all the positions, and there wasn't like a single job that I even wanted to apply for because I didn't think it was worth designing. So I was like, okay, I'll work for myself. Like, I can do this. So I ended up doing freelance design. A lot of it at the time was web work. Like, I designed websites and logos, and I dabbled in medical design a little bit. But I also decided that that wasn't working for me. Like, I really questioned everything that I designed and that I put out into the world. And I realized that I wasn't quite happy with the freelance work I was doing. At the time I was just starting off, so I kind of took the projects I could get, and I didn't feel like they were worth designing, honestly. So I looked back at some projects that I did in school and after college, and they were the types of projects that got me really excited. So I looked at them and I was like, man, what is so exciting about these projects and not exciting about these projects to me, like some self-reflection. And I realized that this is where the third circle came in. I realized that I loved designing projects that have the opportunity to educate people and to change the way they think about the world and to empower them to do something else. It's not something they passively use, it can actually change their behavior. So that's kind of where I realized at the time it seemed really long. It was actually just 8 months of me trying to do a job and then realizing I didn't like it and trying something else and realizing I didn't like it until I realized, wow, design, technology, and education, like that's what I want to do. Like products and projects that touch upon those topics are really worth doing. Like the world needs more of those. So after my year of trying to figure out what my voice is and what I care about, I saw this article about Aya Badir, who she's the founder and CEO of littleBits. She was working on this project, back in 2010. I saw this article in 2011, and like lightning bolts went off in my head. I was like, oh my God, like this is it. Like I have to work here. Like this is exactly the type of product that I would feel proud to work in, that I think should really exist in the world, and I have to work here. And in my head, I was like, wow, does the world need another electronic building block? Like, oh my God, yes, it totally does. Like, this doesn't exist yet. I really want to help make this happen. And that's how I got to littleBits 4 years ago. So I'm going to talk a little bit about littleBits. I think I have a short video. But in a sentence, littleBits, we're on a mission to unleash the inner inventor inside of everyone with our easy-to-use platform of electronic building blocks. And I think, part of why I connected so much with littleBits' mission is how can we solve the challenges we face today if we don't understand the world we live in? So a lot of littleBits is about technology literacy, and I think, a lot of times, we use our cell phone, we use remotes, we use radios, but if you understand how those devices work, you can actually make them better. You can create different devices that don't exist yet. And that part of empowering people to design their own things really spoke to me as a designer. Here's a short video about how they work. Cool. So this is actually one of the first prototypes of littleBits that our CEO and founder Aya Badir started working on. They were really crude pieces of cardboard and like copper tape taped together, and they've really evolved to be sophisticated pieces of electronics that are pre-engineered so that you can just snap them together very quickly and create circuits in a few seconds. And I put these close-up shots because they're really beautifully designed. Like every component on the circuit board is placed and thought of in terms of user interface and interaction design. So I joined littleBits back in early 2012, and the company's been around for about 4.5 years. So in the 4 years that I've been a part of that team, we've made over 70 different modules, and our goal is really to create every interaction you can ever think of into a little block so that when you're ready and you have an idea for a product you want to design, you can just snap them together in the order that makes sense to you. And part of my role at littleBits is developing the kits and the products that we sell. So when I joined in 2012, we just had a few products, and every year, you know, we experiment and we try out many different products. So you can see the evolution of how we're growing as a company and how, you know, thinking as a business, how can we scale into wholesale and make it easier for people to use our products. So over the past 4 years, we've actually made 15 kits. I think I actually missed one, 16 kits. So very, very busy. And all of them, I want to show you guys one more video. All of them really culminated last year where we sort of took a break. You can see in 2014 was a very busy year for me. And then 2015, we actually took a little bit of a breather and reflected on the past 4 years of how people want to invent and how kids invent. And we created this one product called Gizmos and Gadgets, where we're actually teaching kids how to create their own toys, like their own remote control cars, without any engineering or design experience at all. So that's what the kit's about, and I'll talk a little bit about, let's see. So as the director of product design at littleBits, my job is really to make sure that the invention process is as empowering, transformative, educational, and fun as possible. So really thinking about, you know, how do different people invent and how do they design? And it's always tricky with DIY products. I don't know if anyone is interested in going that route, because it's really more about the process than the end result of what they make. You want to make sure they have a great time making something so that they want to do it again. And the more and more people invent, the more confident they get. And then I really think that, you know, 5-10 years from now, the more interesting and creative products we will have, because we opened up that barrier for people. Another part, this is probably my more fun part of my job, is that I get to work with and lead a group of really creative, awesome designers that, you know, we basically make interactive, fun projects all day and test them with kids and break things. It's awesome. Some information about how we've grown over the years. So we're in over 2,000 schools. When I joined, there was actually 3 employees. Now there's 110. So it's been really interesting to be part of a startup, and I think you get to learn so much. When I first started, I answered the phones, got lunch, illustrated instructions, designed packaging, and I did a little bit of everything. And it was awesome because I really felt like I understood how the business worked and how you can scale a business from 3 people to 100 people to 100 SKUs. It's been a really great ride. These are just a few examples of projects that I think are really great examples of how design and tech can mesh together and with the arts. This is a pizza box phonograph that somebody made with littleBits, where you can just take a pizza box, use some of our electronic bits to spin something, and basically make your own musical instrument. And then to bigger projects, like this is an 8-foot tall, large arcade game that we made with littleBits that there's hundreds of bits in there. It's like super, super complex. Down to very poetic projects. This is what we call a spinning replicator, where you can draw a picture on one side and then turn the machine on and it draws the same picture on the other side.
This has a special
Oh wait, let me intro this first. This is actually one of my favorite videos. It always almost makes me cry. This is a group of girls that just started a program with littleBits, and they were challenged to invent their own product. I think they're like 8 years old.
This has a special cast that has a fan built into it. It also has places that you can scratch your skin if you have an itch. Wow, I really wish my brother had this, and it's super comfortable. Ask your doctor for an AeroCast 3000 today if your arm is broken.
So we have like 8-year-old girls who are making things like this in school, and just imagine what how like incredibly impressive and empowered they're gonna be in 10 years when they graduate. I just think it's really gonna change like the way we design things forever. And let's see, I have my last example is, I'm not sure how many people have heard of Ringly. It's an awesome, awesome company, but Christina, the CEO and founder of Ringly, actually prototyped her first prototype of the ring with littleBits. So, we really view ourselves as a platform for kids, for teachers, even for adults. If you want to make something, there's no age bias at all. So I would say over the past couple years, when 4 years ago, I really realized that my design voice and my design opinion is that I'm obsessed with designing products within design, technology, and education, and that anything else isn't really worth designing to me. So once I figured that out, I just went for it, and I found a lot of projects that really excited me because I had that clarity of I knew what excited me. So there's a few other projects I want to share with you guys that I also work on with littleBits, or alongside littleBits. I started a design collective called Group Hug that always puts on design shows during New York Design Week. And the motto of the club is that Group Hug is a design collective that addresses the overwhelming problems that society faces. And this was inspired because I go to New York Design Week shows every year. And every year when I go, I'm always so disappointed by them because I feel like they're still showing design from like the 50s and the 60s, which are lamps and chairs and furniture and like I said, things that I feel like it's like we need to be pushing the envelope a little bit more as designers. So these shows are a little more experimental than what you normally see during Design Week, but every year we choose a theme that is like a hot topic for the year. So in 2014, we did a show called Trigger that was around gun violence. So challenging designers to think outside the box and how could you design something that would help solve that problem. Last year we did a show called Feed Me around nutrition, and then this year we're doing a show called Judge Me around prejudice. And again, my goal here with Group Hug is to really push designers to think about how they can design things in an educational way that will really make an impact on the world. And then another project I'm currently working on that was very inspired by my work in school is called WildGrid, and we're creating these kinetic and mobile chargers to really get your devices off the grid. So this example here is a biocharger that's charging your phone to the microbes in soil. So if you're to leave today thinking anything from my talk, I really want you to be hypercritical of what you design and make sure that whatever you're designing matches what your opinion is on what the world should be, because that's the only way that you're actually going to make an impact on the world. And again, think about this. Do you think blank, whatever you're working on, should exist in the world? And if the answer is no, like, stop doing it. Like, don't waste your time. Because there are so many things that I think the world needs and that I'm sure you guys all think that the world needs, and you should be the one to do it. And this is cheesy because it's a quote from my own CEO, but it's really good. So Aya Badir, the founder and CEO of littleBits, always says that In the end, we will have better products because the inventor pool is more diverse in terms of gender, race, thinking, backgrounds, and teaching, and the world will be a better place for it. And I 1,000% couldn't agree more. And I think that's even more reason for you guys to really focus on things that you care about, because the products and the solutions will be better, whatever you're working on. Thank you.
And finally, I've got the great pleasure to introduce Madison Maxey of The Cråted, who was recently named the 30 under 30 from Forbes magazine. Thanks.
Okay. All right, cool. Hi, everyone. Here, lift this up. Well, that was such a great presentation, Krystal. I really enjoyed it. It was so fun to see. It's been cool to kind of watch how everybody explains their process and what they're doing. And something that I thought I would share with you guys is the idea of creative technology. I personally did not know that this was a space when I was younger, that people could play it. I didn't know that there were resources for it. And a lot of what I do is creative technology work. So I thought I would share a bit more about the space and what's possible there in my work, and how it's all kind of come together. Just wondering, has anybody heard of creative technology before? You have a few. Okay. Oh, great. You have a few people. Yeah, so Creative Technology Week in New York is coming up, I think in May, I believe. So if you're interested, it's a great chance to meet a lot of people who are doing cool work in the space. But so basically, yeah, people are like, creative tech, what? Especially like our parents' generation, they're like, that's not a thing. And maybe it's not a thing, but we're going to pretend it's a thing for now, at least. So it's like, what is this thing? It's all of these really interesting combination of design and technology, or creative and artistic practices in technology. So like hardware and imagination, for example. This is a project by Chris Eckert, and he was in a residency program that I was in as well. And he makes all of these robots that have very interesting interactions with people. So each individual disc has a retina tracker, and the eyes that he hand paints looks at you as you're looking at it, and then it gets bored of your face and looks at something else, which I think is kind of funny. And then you're standing there trying to get it to look at you again, because that's how people are, and it's this great interaction. But behind each disc is a block of servo motors, a Raspberry Pi. Each disc is vacuum formed from ABS plastic. Everything that goes into it is really a fabrication process. And there's also software and beauty, which I love some of the work that different artists are doing in the computational design space. So these are pieces from Reza Ali. All of Reza's work, or most of his work, is written in C++, the programming language, and he uses a toolbox or a library called Cinder. So there are a lot of tools for these kinds of things, but his work has been commissioned by Dolby or Backstage at OK Go for some of their shows. So there's some really cool opportunities to really contribute to what's happening in like the business world or the music world by working on these different skills. And then machinery and magic, and this kind of gets into the digital fabrication space, which is one of my favorite spaces. Has anyone here played with 3D printing or CNC milling or digifab at all? You have a few? All right. Okay, awesome. So as you probably experienced, you can make these phenomenal geometries and outcomes by using advanced technology and fabrication machines. So this is a piece from Iris van Herpen, made using a methodology called Stereolithography, which is a 3D printing methodology. And often for 3D printing, we're told that it's a plastic nozzle drawing a line, which it can be, but there's so much more to the machinery that makes these amazing products. This is a dress by Francis Batanti for Dita Von Teese, done using selective laser sintering, another 3D printing technique, and covered in Swarovski crystals. The patterning for the dress is all part of a Fibonacci sequence. So I tell you guys the details behind these things because by using different technological tools, whether that be math or machinery, you can make amazing outcomes that honestly just other people can't. And I think that's how you find great opportunities. Personally, I work a lot with textiles and electronics. So I have a studio called The Cråted. We're out in the Brooklyn Fashion Design Accelerator. And this was from an article in Wired magazine about a project we had worked on that basically says that we're focused on seeing wearable technology as being something that's part of the fibers that we wear every day. So how many people here own a closet full of fabric? People laugh. You have a few meager hands. So everybody has a ton of fabric. And when we're looking at wearable technology, it's often done in plastic devices. And those are important and wonderful and a great contribution. But we're wondering how we can take advantage of all of that fabric and give it intelligence. So there are lots of different things. We like to focus a lot on research, but we have done some more marketable projects, and I thought that you guys might like this one being at FIT. So Google was looking to make a coding project that they had online as part of their initiative for Made with Code real, and they showed us this digital dress. And they were like, can you take the code from the digital dress and put it in a real dress? It was like, it's not that easy, I wish it were. But we ended up being able to make a dress with a programmable matrix, so you can show different animations on it. And Lupita Nyong'o wore it on the Trevor Noah show. And then it was part of Zach Posen's runway show as well. So we did the electronics for that. Zach Posen was the head designer, and Google, with their very nice deep pockets, put it all together. And they had the whole Made with Code initiative, so they gave a lot of support. Cool. This was a project that we had collaborated on with a company here in New York called Print All Over Me. And so we were really curious about this idea of calling things wearable technology and how we can kind of expand the definition. The word wearable itself, if you look it up on Wikipedia, since it's a Wikipedia event, there's no entry under it because you don't need to say wearable clothing. It's completely redundant. It's like saying edible food, which assumes that there's something else out there. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's lots of inedible food and I just haven't had it. But there were this series of UV responsive garments. So you bring it out into the sun, and it changes patterns, and then all of the patterning for the garments themselves were done using JavaScript in Illustrator, showing this parametric equation called epitrochoids. So all of the art that we did was kind of a stab at math and science, and then we had these UV responsive inks, wondering if people would accept the idea that maybe this is wearable technology. And these were some of the press outlets that showed the project. We sold them on Kickstarter. And this was a project that, personally, I really enjoyed that we worked on last summer in the studio. It's a heated jacket called Kelvin. And it was really looking at the circuitry behind it. So how could any apparel company make their jackets heated? Can we find largely textile circuitry elements to allow them to manufacture something like this? And largely because a heated jacket shouldn't be a novelty product. It could be something that we all have. We live in New York, it's cold, it would be great to stay warm, and it's an easy intro. So we worked on the circuitry and design for this project, working on smaller battery packs, et cetera, and ended up working on a more customized prototype for North Face for developing a product like this. And then this was an article that came out that I thought was really funny because it's really not true. That's a good thing to know about lots of press, is that everything's super sensationalized. So you will be cold again. The article lies, but we did work on a heated jacket. That part is true. And then in terms of residencies, there are so many great opportunities in the city to work on creative and experimental work. The School of Visual Arts has a Visible Futures Lab, which is like a fab lab where you can work on different projects. So I did a residency there working on this remote-controlled shirt. It's called Zygomatic, and we were wondering if it's possible for somebody to have one garment that you wear all the time that changes shape and form, rather than have a bunch of different things, often for the purpose of an aesthetic change, not necessarily a practical change. So this was a bit out there, but it was a really cool chance to work on some software, actuators, electronics, and bring them all together. And as of now, our main focus is really looking at textile circuit printing, because that's the enabling technology behind what lets textiles and electronics come together. And there's not a lot of there aren't a lot of pieces to put together the textile electronic puzzle, and we want to try and make that better. So I did a residency at Autodesk. If anybody here likes digital fabrications and creative tech, totally do a residency at Autodesk. They basically give you resources to like do whatever you want for a while, which is really fun. And I worked on a printer that would, it's basically a 2D CNC machine that prints circuits onto fabric. So it's a really large bed printer. It's made from a textile itself. Let's see if I have a video here. So this is sort of like the outcome of the time that I had spent there. So the machine itself works through tension, and you can attach it to a table, and that's what allows the gear system to work. And then you control it with an interface on your computer. I like hard-coded a lot of the things, which is kind of cheating, but I know that you guys won't tell anyone, so I'll share that with you. And then this is a conductive acrylic material. Right now we're working on making our own materials to be able to repeatedly print patterns onto fabric that are conductive and can be used for circuits. This is being printed on nylon, and then you place the components. And then once it dries, you can see that that piece of fabric is a circuit. It's just a simple circuit with an LED, but we're wondering where this can go next. And also, if you're doing something like that with conductive thread, it takes significantly more time. It's hard to get repeatability. It's hard to iterate quickly using screen printing, so we're really curious about being able to iterate quickly for some of these techniques. Well, and then this was another one that I had printed, a fun pattern. And then just in terms of using other tools, I think there are some great opportunities in looking at additive manufacturing or 3D printing. So I had used code to generate these lacy patterns to try and get more flexible things out of a simple 3D printer. Tried CNCing some magnetic rubbers and materials to try and make modular fibers. So there's so much room for experimentation in the creative technology and fashion space, and I think that anybody can make a contribution, which is kind of a fun place to be. There aren't a lot of spaces where anybody can make a contribution. Oh, I thought I would also tell you guys about the business side of things, because as fun as it is to talk about different projects, you have to be able to fiscally support them. Or I guess you could also like live with your parents or have a trust fund, but I don't think that that's an option for everyone. Not an option for me, sadly. So when I was younger, I was like, how do all these business things work? Like, it's the adults wheeling and dealing, and I didn't know how this is done. And it's kind of a clear process. Like, often you'll have an initial contact, and then an info call with a potential client. Initial contact is either you reaching out to them or them reaching out to you. And then hop on a call, talk about the project to understand what they want. And then you'll send in a proposal. This talks about timeline and cost and information. Most companies have a proposal outline already prepared. So it's one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, Jim, we'll like prepare a proposal for you. And then you just like enter things into a presentation and send it to them. And then you have your follow-up. Make sure that they have everything that they need, the information that they want, and often they'll generate a contract, or you can use your standard contract. And then from there, once all of that stuff is done, then you get into execution. But as you can see, most of these things are not like fun makery things. A lot of it's business and logistics to get to the point where you can actually start making a project. And then post-execution, you have your delivery and like a wrap-up call to make sure that everybody's happy and they get what they want. So this is kind of the process that I go through when I'm working on a project for a client, and that I know a lot of people go through. And just kind of from that list, you can see that like creative businesses or creative work is often like 25% making and creativity and 75% planning and logistics. And I think, as we heard earlier with like licensing jewelry, when somebody's paying you to do a thing, you cannot do whatever you want. Like maybe you're super inspired to change the jewelry and add like 70,000 diamonds, and all those diamonds drive up the price point, and then they can't be sold on TV anymore, and then nobody wants it and everybody's upset. So it's really important to understand everybody's motives when you're working on a project with the client. So just kind of, this was a project that I worked on more recently. So Google Creative Labs wanted to redesign their router skin for the Onhub device. Some other companies that they had hired made these really cool designs of like a slinky and other creative ways to house their new router. And when they came to us, the first thing that we did was put together a calendar and a timeline to understand if it was feasible to get the delivery done. So something that Krystal had mentioned earlier is that a lot of people get the perception that math isn't really that useful, but math is extremely useful for predicting the future. So being able to add up the numbers of how much something is going to cost before you pay for it, make sure that you can come in under budget and on time. And then, a lot of it was done in the computer, so we did rendering of these different draped fabrics in order to come out with sample sketches like this that you send to the client and see if they like it and take their feedback and iterate. And then doing small prototypes, these are mini prints. And then we go into the larger prototype. This is done on a stereolithography machine that uses an inkjet style printing. So for all the resin for this print, it's about $700, which is why you definitely want to iterate and prototype digitally first, because that is substantially cheaper than printing it again. And at the end of the day, this was the router cover that we had ended up making for Google. It was a fabric, it was like a textile draped over the shape of the router, largely done in the computer, printed using digital fabrication tools, and then delivered to them in a way that hopefully they really liked. And so I think that this is kind of a fun project example of how all of these tools come together in the creative technology space to make objects that we see around us. So again, we talked about creative careers, a lot of business things, like less making things. But if you're interested in the space, I think that there's some great books that are related to the topic. These are some of my favorites. Art Inc. is great. They touch a lot on the idea of identity, which I think is important in deciding what anybody wants to do with themselves. Steal Like an Artist is great. It just has really simple tips of how a lot of art works in a more logical way in terms of finding inspiration and being educated and getting your stuff out there. Show Your Work is also a great book, which is about also getting your stuff out there so that people can find you, so that they can understand your aesthetic and your goals and be able to put you on projects that actually make sense for you. And then in terms of running a business, these are kind of the things that a lot of Art Inc. touches on is, you need a network, you need a way to do sales, you need accounting and invoicing, and you'll need legal help. These are kind of the core things for having a business together. And it's super important to rely on these people and rely on these portions. It's very, very hard to do things by yourself or without, like signing contracts without legal help. It's very challenging because you don't know what you're signing and you don't know what's fair to agree to and whatnot. So I kind of like to think of them in this way, where it's like your network is really your friends. If your friends are doing interesting things, they'll be able to help you find interesting connections, and hopefully you for them as well, which I think makes friendships a lot stronger. Sales is often a lot of problem solving and communication. So if a company comes to you and they have a problem, it is not your job to give them something that they don't want. It is your job to find out what's wrong and how you might be able to make it better. Accounting and invoicing, I put as like collecting your beans, where it is like your job to make sure that things are invoiced on time and that you're getting paid and that there's an easy system for it to make, because you're doing their work for an income, and it's important that you have a system in place for that. And then legal help is really your really smart friend with expertise who understands legal jargon and contracts and has seen these sorts of things happen and can give you advice in advance. So just kind of a nice way to frame it when you're looking for these resources. So just a bit of tangents and ramblings to end things off with is that this is hard in a lot of ways. I think that doing your own thing or finding creative careers or working in creative tech is challenging because there's not as much of a formula for it. And I always like this image because, as they say, everybody wants to be successful until they see what it actually takes, where like you do get bruised, And like sometimes things really hurt, sometimes you're not sure what's going on, but it's totally worthwhile because hard is this like amazing, exciting adventure of learning and growing and failing and experiencing life and having great stories to tell and learning the entire time. I think it's a really fun adventure to follow the things that you're excited about. And as you heard Krystal mention, to have like firm convictions about the things that you believe and that you want to be true is also very hard because they're polarizing, but it's worth it. And I think that's how you make an impact. And this is one of my favorite articles from Paul Graham. He's known in the Silicon Valley. He's known in Silicon Valley as this tech guru in Birkenstocks, and he has an article about like what you'll wish you knew to himself when he was in high school. And basically the main point of the article is to be working on hard problems. And if you're always working on hard problems and challenging yourself, then you really can't go wrong. If you're working on a problem that keeps you awake at night and gets you up early in the morning, eventually someone will see that passion, and I think that you'll be able to make progress and contribute and really grow as a person and also grow yourself in a field. So those are my words of 22-year-old wisdom. Take them or leave them. But if you'd like to get in touch or have thoughts or feedback or questions, you can get in touch with me here at maddie@thecråted.com. Yeah, cool.
So thank you, all of you. That was just really amazing. And now we're going to begin a question and answer session. So if you have questions in the audience, please let me know, and I'll bring around the mic.
Is this on? Yes. Okay. Yesterday, the astronaut came back from 340 days in space, and PBS had an hour of what it means to be up there in this space object. You have to send someone up there, it has to connect. You have to send supplies, it has to connect. People from different countries. And while you all were talking, especially the last speaker, I kept thinking of innovations and innovations of space. Now, I know you're talking about design, but do you have any ideas about contributions regarding space, the space program? What they were trying to show on PBS, that there is this amazing thing that you are not aware of, that every second of what they did had to do with technology and planning. So that when I was kind of inspired by all that you were saying, it sounded like you were the type of talent that would contribute to many different aspects of life. But I'm asking about specifically, did you ever think of space program, or have they been in contact with you?
Sure. So as the last speaker, I think I can answer that first. So your question is really about like building things for space and maybe textile electronics in space. Was that it? Yeah. So there's a group at MIT called the Manned Vehicle Lab that's working on a second-generation spacesuit, and that entire spacesuit relies on a large-scale circuit that can simulate gravity by restricting or releasing depending on an electrical pulse. And I had done some research for them to just look at different textile circuitry methodologies, and there's not much. like there was no super robust, easy to manufacture, reliable solution that we could find for the current and voltage that they needed. And I think that's part of why we're really excited about working on some of the enabling techs in the space, because you should be able to make a great spacesuit. And I think that kind of stuff really benefits from being able to put electronics in fabric. So we need better tools to make that happen.
Is there a question here? Did you have a question? Oh, did did you have a question? I'm sorry. No, you were just leaning forward. Sorry about that. Question down here. Okay. I feel like a game show host. Okay.
How did you start with technology? Like, because you talk about design, but you didn't say like how you started. And you're so young.
Sure.
You're only 22, right?
Hi, I went to school for fashion. I was always super interested in making things. I think everybody here is. And a lot of it was self-taught. I'd taken classes at General Assembly on front-end web development and had this like personal commitment that for every day I was taking a class, I would do 3 hours of practice on my own. And during that phase, I got really into coffee, which is like a lifelong commitment to coffee. But a lot of it was choosing a project and then doing a lot of research and learning along the way. And also being around people who are so good at their craft and what they do and learning from them. It was really a lot of hands-on learning and then personal practice and having the dedication to practice and learn and read and research and develop those skills. But I think a lot of them are very learnable. Like, not learnable to the point of being like an astrophysicist, but like learnable to the point of being able to make a thing.
Stephanie, there's one question over here.
This question is for Krystal. I'm just curious, because on one of your slides it shows that littleBits works with schools, and I was just curious how that works, and is it lower schools, or is it colleges as well, or what exactly is that connection?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually, littleBits, it's kind of a double-edged sword for us sometimes because littleBits can be used for any age, which is kind of overwhelming but exciting at the same time. So we are in over 2,000 schools. We actually target elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and higher education, but with different content and different curriculum. So, you know, for the elementary and middle school levels, we do a lot of like STEAM, which is STEM with an A, arts, a lot of STEAM programs where people can build drawing machines, self-driving vehicles, like tinker and build things. And then more on the higher ed side, we do a lot of entrepreneurial activities. So kind of like Christina from Ringley that you saw, like enabling students to bring their ideas to life and then go out and create businesses and things like that. But, oh, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's really good, but I'm interested then if you're working with New York City public schools by any chance.
Oh.
I mean, is it public schools or is it private schools that contact you?
It's
Yeah.
It's a mixture of both. I would say that we're getting more traction in public schools over the past year or so, but in the beginning it was mostly private schools, but we're definitely open and looking for opportunities to get into more public schools.
Okay. Just everything was so interesting, by the way, all of you guys.
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, hey. So my question is to Grace, actually. I was wondering if you could go a little bit more into it, how your product works, and how did you overcome some of the challenges because my major is cosmetics and fragrances, and I know that different pigments might interact differently with a formula. So how did you make it work so that one formula could be printed in any color, let's say, if that's how it works?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I guess the printer itself, as I mentioned in the presentation, it's gone through several iterations. So it moved from a printer to now like a pen system, but the concept is very much the same. And you're very astute to point out that yes, pigments, and not so much pigments, but dyes especially, they do interact with bases a lot, and that could the pH levels could definitely affect the colors. But we definitely, the way that it works is that we definitely kind of find pigments and pigment blends to make sure they are very, very stable. And we try to kind of limit the addition of solvents and other bases along with it, just to make sure that the colorants are just colorants that we're doing. And we try to make sure that for instance, if a person would want to make a lip gloss, we ask them to add the mixing material, the viscous material afterwards. So by adding it afterwards, it helps to keep the integrity of the color that they've just created. You're welcome.
Okay, there are two people raised their hands, so you got it, okay.
So we'll use the mic. So I guess first of all, thank you. This is an incredibly inspiring presentation, especially for someone who, isn't necessarily looking to switch professional careers entirely, but just looking to learn and come up with, new side projects on a more personal level. So I guess with that said, other than when I get home, I'm going to go on littlebits.com and figure out what project to build next, after I come home from work. But what advice do each of you individually have for someone that just kind of wants to learn more about design and the tech space on the side as more of a hobby?
I guess I can answer this one first. So I think personally, I love side projects so much. I always have my job, and then I have 5 side projects. And I think I talked about this a little bit, but I think it's about, first of all, finding the one that means something to you, because then you'll always find time to do it. And then I think Maddie mentioned this, but there are so many resources online and classes that you can take to learn whatever you want. So I think if you set a goal for yourself, set a deadline. And I feel like I did this with Group Hug, that it's a public deadline, there has to be a show on the walls. Then you know that you have to do it, and really let that drive you.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. I think my whole career is a bunch of side projects. I think a lot of, I would really, really encourage you would be amazed at what you would find on YouTube. You don't even really need to go and pay for a class anymore. And also, if you even wanted a class, or if you really want to pay for a class, there are online classes you could actually pay for, which you don't even need to. The quality of YouTube stuff that you can find is amazing. If you even want to learn about biology, good stuff, it's on there. So I would say literally just go on the internet, go on YouTube. And again, I think the first thing you should do is really find something you're insanely passionate about. And then if you want to learn about it, go on the internet, go find resources.
Absolutely agreed with everyone. So many resources, and kind of a way I like to mentally model working on a side project is being on the search. There's this book called The Moviegoer by Walker Percy, and he's to be on the search is to be onto something, and not to have a search is to be in despair. So when you're working on a personal project, I feel like it also gives you an excuse to engage with new people and to go to new places and research new things, and to give yourself a search, I think is a wonderful gift that makes things really exciting. So find a search or a project that is really tantalizing, and then just kind of dig in and find out who you need to chat with. When we were doing the remote control short project, we ended up meeting with this expert in origami and tessellations, and understanding the tessellation community and all of these things you just don't normally get to do if you don't have a side project. So I agree to find a project and find the resources.
Hi. So I feel that often in terms of technology and science fields, so often men are seen as the faces of these fields. And so I was kind of wondering if you guys along your terms of education and getting into these fields have found yourself facing challenges and being discouraged as women in these fields. And then additionally, now that you're in these fields, what do you see as the importance of getting other women involved and starting when they're young and young girls and stuff? What do you think is, do you believe that that's something that's important and something that should really be taken on and encouraged?
It's funny because Maddie and I had a whole conversation about how much we hate that question, actually. Only because I think sometimes when you emphasize it, it creates more of a barrier. But I think I can only speak personally, and I think I personally have never found it more difficult to be a woman in tech. I think I'm very fortunate and lucky because our CEO is also a female engineer. So, you know, the atmosphere of our office is like very inclusive and really energetic and awesome. I think that, you know, events like this, I honestly hope that in 5 years they don't exist anymore, just because the workforce will be so diverse that we don't need to talk about it anymore. But I think, you know, personally, my strategy is always just not to think about it and just like set my sights high and just like do it. And if you think it's gonna be hard, then it probably will be. But if you think that you're just gonna like kill it, then you will.
Yeah, and I think you know, I think for me personally, I'm kind of in a space where it's not only tech, but I delve in a space usually where it's tech and cosmetics. So, you know, I'm surrounded by women all the time. I'm surrounded by, and also I did a lot of fashion, like not fashion, but like footwear and jewelry also. So I've always been surrounded by women because I think I have to be more when I make something, I'm not really making a tech product, because then, you know, as I mentioned before, you have to design first a good shoe. Because if you don't design a good shoe, no one's gonna buy it. So I think when you're designing a product that's both tech and ornamental, you first have to design a good X. Then, you know, you have to kind of also, along with it, infuse the technology. So, you know, you have to figure out, you know, what are you really designing for? Like, are you designing as a tech person, or are you designing as a designer? And I think at the end, again, we're not going to have a conversation of designing with tech. Tech is going to be design, you know. It's going to be like designing with a scissor, you know. It's a tool, you know. So everyone's going to have tech in their toolkit.
Totally, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think that when it comes to the umbrella of women in technology, it clusters women as this one group of people, and I think that like privilege and interest and diversity is such a varied and nuanced thing that like I don't think all women should be in technology. I don't think all men should be in technology. I don't think like anyone should do like one specific thing, because everybody's very different. But I think the real problem is when someone thinks that they're not capable of doing something specific because of something that they can't change about themselves. I think that that's what a lot of these campaigns are going for, and in general, just kind of like people should have agency to do what they want to do. And if somebody's stopping them from having agency, that's problematic. And hopefully we won't see that as much in the future.
Hi, so you guys all obviously have very well-seasoned backgrounds, and you've accomplished so much at such a young age, and in spite of being passionate in your industries, where do you guys see yourselves in 10 years? And as a follow-up question to that, is there anything specifically that you haven't accomplished yet that is maybe a big goal that you want to do down the line?
Wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. I like that question. I mean, there's still, I personally feel like I really haven't accomplished much. Like, there's still so much to do. But yeah, I would really like to figure out how to make textile circuitry easy to manufacture, super robust, really useful for industry or for consumer apparel or for furniture or for composite architecture. And that's life's work. Like, there's something very exciting about being like, I have decided that this random weird niche topic is something that I want to be life's work. And that's something that I'd like to accomplish in the future.
Yeah, I think kind of on a similar level, since I really figured out where my passion lies in like this intersection of design and technology and education, I think definitely viewing that as like a life's work and making a mark in that field. I think in general, like making a product that can change someone's behavior and like the outcome of their life is a huge goal that I hope, you know, littleBits changes like generations of the way people consume technology. I think on like more of a career aspiration, I love working at a startup. I think it's incredible to take a company from, you know, zero to like a global brand. So I would love to start my own company one day.
I think for me, like a lot of my past projects, except for this one, they've been very sort of more like learning projects, or like very sort of like, they weren't very like deep or meaningful, or they didn't like really, you know, kind of like resonate with me. But I think going forward, you know, especially with this project, you know, it does have a very, you know, personal kind of meaning to me. And so I think for me, you know, there's no specific kind of like goal I have 10 years from now, but definitely, you know, the things I do or the things I make, I would hope it makes a positive impact in the world, or, you know, it makes a difference. And so I think whatever we make, I think all of us, we hope it makes some good impact or some good impression that the world needs, not just like another chair. Yeah.
Hi. This question might come off a little strange, but having the mindset of an entrepreneur, would you say you're an overthinker or an impulsive thinker? And how do you balance that when it comes to creativity and business?
Oh, is that anyone? Oh, that's an interesting question.
I think, so having the mind, I would parse it out as having the mind of an artist makes me impulsive, which kind of makes it difficult to be an entrepreneur because you can't be impulsive as an entrepreneur. In some ways, because you have to be a business person, and a business person needs to make rational decisions. And so, you know, I think you do have to really train yourself to kind of be two different people. And it helps having a good network of people who've been there before and who are like you and who've done that to be a good sounding board. So it's very important to have people around you that you can trust, that you can kind of, you know, ask questions and get advice from. But it is an interesting space to be in when you're a creative entrepreneur, because you know, it takes two different kind of strengths to do both, and that's why typically I think you see business partners. You have the creative person who's extremely creative, and then you have the business partner. And so, but when you're one person doing both, it is kind of, there's a trickiness to that, in my opinion. Some people are magical people who can do everything.
I think like generally going with your gut is usually for the best. Like if you're really passionate about something and you care about it, like you probably have like this is like mystical, but like an inner star that like you kind of know what feels right and what doesn't feel right. But I also think like in terms of decision making, thinking of it as like prototyping, that's kind of how we do it at littleBits, that like if you make the wrong decision, it's okay. It was your V1 decision, you're gonna fix it. So like at the same, depending on, you know, how big of a decision it is, but it's okay to decide something, I think, like viscerally, and you think it's gonna work, but if it doesn't work, acknowledge that it didn't work and then just do something else. And that way you can spend less time debating if it's a good decision or not and get to the solution faster.
But absolutely. I feel like now is a really great time for creative people to take more entrepreneurial steps, because there are a lot of tools that enable you to make quick decisions, prototype them, iterate them, and then try something new. Like a lot of what Krystal mentioned is like highlighted in the lean startup methodology, where it's like you make assumptions, especially if you're programming, you make an assumption, you try it, you see how it works. Oh, it broke. Okay, great. Let's go back to an early version and go with that instead. So I think that often it's like finding the tools that work well for your personal skill set, rather than trying to pretend that you're like the hyper-rational business person in a super serious business when maybe that's just not what's compatible with you or anyone.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be so high pressure. Like it's okay if you make the wrong decision.
So this question is for all of you. You guys were amazing. Thank you so much. For a person that wants to go into something design and technology combined, thank you. And like you said, there's so much out there in the internet, like to go look at YouTube, like, I don't know, lynda.com that actually FIT gives you, free access to it. And there's so many resources. What do you think, like, if you're not completely decided on what exactly you want to do, what do you think is like the basic or like the core education in technology that you need to have to be successful? Like what programming languages you suggest you should learn first, or like what classes to take, where to go for those? I feel like right now, if you're not really on a computer science degree, there are not that many options in college to learn programming. So right now I'm taking like a processing, which is a programming language here at FIT, but there are not that many other options for learning programming. I mean, like here and in any other colleges. So what do you think, where should I start? Because I go on the internet, I see so many languages, I'm like overwhelmed. So what do you suggest, a person should begin with to learn technology?
Yeah, I guess it depends. That's not a good answer. It depends, like, for creating more like physical interactions with like design and technology. Arduino is a great place to start. It has like a really simple like C-based language that you can use to program. I think Maddie can probably talk more about that. And if you're, just starting off with web, like the simplest way to start experimenting with web code is like CSS. Like just make a website and start messing around with how you can edit it. And then you can, work your way up to Java if that's what you're interested in. But I would say like try something and then just see, it's again like the prototyping mindset, like try anything and just see if you like it. If you didn't like it, try something else.
Yeah, I agreed. I think that like learning the Arduino IDE is really helpful, and then it has a great partner. Processing, which you mentioned, is helpful. I think learning how to use machines is also really helpful. So like understanding how to render files for a CNC machine or an injection molder or things like that. I think that like one of my friends was applying for a job and he wanted to do a really clean design for an industrially designed item. So he took the item and started working backwards and fell into this really deep rabbit hole of like, this is the software they use. This is how they make injection molded items that have no seams. This is the plastic they use. This is how they made the logo. And I think that that's also a great way to learn about the tools that you actually want, is to look at somebody who you really admire, see what they're making, and then work backwards to the tool set that they use. And that tool set will allow you to make not just what they made, but also a whole combination of things in that general space. But yeah, for creative tech, there are a lot of like great kind of standard tool sets like open frameworks, Arduino, processing, basic front-end web development, like CAD modeling for 3D modeling programs, like basic CNC milling, basic PCB design, and all of those things will give you a lot of freedom.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap things up unless there's another question out there. Okay, well, please give a round of applause to our three speakers.